Thank you, Brother Ryan. Children, if you would have normally gone to children's church right now, I need you up front here. Okay, can you come down here with me this morning? Can you make your way up here? We're going to spend just a couple of minutes. Hurry, hurry, hurry. This is your only time that you can run in the church, okay? I'm kind of kidding. But here, sit down right here. I want to talk with, wow, a lot of girls. Man, what is that about? Hi. How are y'all doing? Isn't it nice to be back in church? Hurry, come on, Presley. Yeah. Yes. Hey, do you guys know what a rainbow is? You've heard of that, right? Right. You probably learned about that the first time in Sunday school, maybe. You probably learned that after there was this big flood, that Noah built a boat, and there was this big flood, and after the whole earth was flooded, and after all of the water subsided, there was a rainbow. And it was a promise that God made to us, saying, I'm never going to destroy the world in that way again. So every time we see a rainbow, that should be in our minds. God has made a promise. That's neat, isn't it? Yeah. I want to talk to you about rainbows for another reason, though. Do you know why a rainbow is the colors that it is? Do you know why it is? Why that happens? Well, listen closely. And I'm not a science guy, so most of what I'm telling you I think can be backed up. But in an effort of full disclosure, I'm not a science guy, okay? Anyway, the way I understand it, after it rains, there's still moisture in the air. And the light from the sun, which normally we see as kind of a white, bright light, right? Okay. Actually, because it is being filtered and going through these water drops, because light really isn't just white, it is the combination of many, many colors. It shows up in those different colors in the rainbow. It diffuses the colors. So we see, what colors do we see in the rainbow?
Red, orange, green, blue, purple.
Whoa, stereo even. It's like you guys learned that somewhere, right? Okay, one more question. Do you know what there are three primary colors. Do you know what they are? What are they?
The warm colors are red, orange, and yellow, and the cold colors are purple, blue, and green.
Okay, that's a little different than what I was thinking. I learned back 100 years ago, see, the primary colors, the three main colors from which all colors come are red, yellow, blue, right? Red and yellow make?
Green.
Nope.
Orange.
Orange. No helping out here, okay? These people think they're smart. Okay. What does yellow and blue make?
Green.
Green. All right. You see how that works? But there's three primary colors. Now, the reason I'm telling you about all this color stuff is this morning, in just a second, when we get done, I'm going to be talking about God. Imagine that, a preacher talking about God in church, right? But we're going to be talking about God's holiness. And this is a concept that's very much misunderstood. And I'd like for you to think about how light is broken up into three, right? Three primary colors, and then all the other colors come from it. God's holiness can be seen in three ways, and we're going to look at those this morning. Okay? Awesome. Hey, when church is over, you need to find Miss Camille or me. We've got a little something for you. Okay? From leftover from Easter. Okay? All right. Back to your seats. Back to your seats. Good job. All right. Do you have your outlines this morning? I hope you do, and I hope you'll bring those out this morning. We're going to be building on what we talked about, what we got started last Sunday. We're on a quest to better understand the virtue language of faith. The virtue language of faith. And in your outline, I wanted to just share with you a couple of passages from last week to recap what we talked about last week. We learned in Hebrews 11, chapter 11, verses 1 and 2, that faith is confidence in what we hope for, the assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. And then we learned how important this is. We learned in verse 6 of that same chapter that without faith it is impossible to please God. This is a big deal. We can't please God on any other basis other than faith. Other than faith. Because anyone who comes to Him must believe that He exists and that He rewards those who earnestly seek Him. This is big in our faith, in our walk with God. Now I want to show you one other passage that also emphasizes the power of faith. It's found in the book of 2 Timothy chapter 1 verse 12. It says, notice there it says, this is Paul writing, he says, "That is why I am suffering as I am. Yet this is no cause for shame, because I know whom I have believed and am convinced that He is able to guard what I have entrusted to Him until that day." That would be a great song, wouldn't it? You know that? Do you know that song? Yes. "I know whom I have believed and am persuaded that He is able to keep that which I've committed unto Him against that day." Yes. That's what we're talking about. Paul says, "I know whom I have believed." We need to know whom we have believed. Faith is about believing that God exists and that He rewards those who seek after Him. Yes. But what is the picture of God? What do we understand about God? And so that brings us to what I was talking to the children about, that word holy. Probably the best and most common word in the Bible that we understand as a word describing God is holy. You've heard that one, haven't you? Holy. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. This is the song that will be sung as people and angels and all kinds of creatures are gathered around the throne. Holy, holy, holy. We know those words. But God, listen, God is pure holiness. Kind of like how pure light needs to be understood. It needs to be diffused in a sense so that we can understand the different aspects of it. That's the way holiness is as well. Holiness. And this is part of why it's so confusing for many of us as followers of Jesus to, when we talk about God and we see God being in the Bible, we see so many different things and we wonder, how does this all kind of fit together? This morning, I hope, as you leave this morning, you will say, aha, I think I understand it a little bit better today. So we're going to break the holiness down of God into the three primary dimensions. And what's really awesome is that we have a single chapter in the Bible that gives us a picture of all three of those in one chapter. That I like it when that happens. So we're going to look at that together today. And so we're trying to do, just to recap here, what we're trying to accomplish here is we want to make sure that the picture of God that we have is an accurate picture. So let's look at His holiness. The first dimension, or what I'm calling a manifestation of God's holiness, is God's holiness as majestic. Write that down, as majestic. In your outline, you will notice that the first 5 verses of Isaiah chapter 6 are listed. I want to read that. "In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord, high and exalted, seated on a throne. And the train of His robe filled the temple. And above Him were seraphim, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces. With 2 they covered their feet. And with 2 they were flying. And they were calling to one another, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. The whole earth is full of His glory." At the sound of their voices, the doorposts and thresholds shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. "Woe to me," I cried. "I'm ruined, for I'm a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. And my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty." We learn that at the end of the reign of King Uzziah, who was a disaster for the people of Israel, Isaiah has the incredible experience of being caught up into heaven. He is actually permitted, it's one of those rare occasions where he is allowed to go into God's space, into heaven, and to see what is going on in heaven. He sees God, and his reaction mirrors so many others who have shared that rare experience, like Moses, who when in front of the burning bush, he experienced the same thing, and Elijah and John in the book of Revelation. Each reacted similarly. How? With fear, with discomfort, with total unworthiness. The bright light of God's presence is utterly overwhelming, and it's totally revealing. And you know what Isaiah is saying? "I'm a man of unclean lips." What he's saying in modern language is, I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't belong here. I'm a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. And so he expresses that, woe is me. Woe is me. Woe, meaning doom and disaster and just anxiety is upon me. That's the effect that he experienced as he encountered the majesty of God's holiness. Lips. Why lips? Lips symbolize speech. And, of course, Jesus would teach us centuries later about the connection between lips and heart. That what comes out of our mouth isn't just what comes out of our mouth. What comes out of our mouth is really a reflection of what's going on at the innermost parts of us. It's the true who we are. In Isaiah chapters 1 through 5, if you were to go back and to read those 5 chapters, you would find just a litany of messages from God through the prophet Isaiah to the people of Israel, and how they needed to just repent and to come clean and to come back to Him, but they would have none of it. They wanted a God on their terms. On their terms. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? I think that's part of our problem within the modern church today. We tend to want to create a God that fits what we think God should be like. And usually what we end up with is a parody, or an idol, if you will. Because we do not see God as the Bible completely shows us God is. You see, real and authentic encounters are going to produce humility and unworthiness and discomfort and woe. Coming into the presence of God should cause that. Well, what if it doesn't? Well, I would suggest to you that maybe we should take a step back. And if that isn't how we feel about God, if we still can't understand who He is, His majesty, and how unworthy we are to stand before Him, then perhaps we need to take a step back and rethink that. Perhaps our picture of God is not as accurate as we might think. Perhaps we need a fresh encounter with the intense light of God's presence. How do you know that? What are the symptoms of that? Let me suggest 3. Pride, Pride. Basically, pride is the sin of thinking higher than yourself than you should. Shows you that you're not seeing things accurately. Priority. The sin of priority. In other words, choosing other things before God. And one that oftentimes we struggle with is anger. Anger. Anger is generally born from pride. What is the answer? Step into the light. Step into the light of the majesty of God. Come into that bright light of His majesty, and you will see yourself as you truly are, which is what He wants us to do, which leads us to the second manifestation. If you'll turn the outline over, the second manifestation of God's holiness is God's holiness as judgment. As judgment. Isaiah chapter 6, starting with verse 6. Then one of the seraphim flew to me with a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with tongs from the altar. With it he touched my mouth and said, "See, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for." Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send? And whom will go for us?" And I said, "Here I am. Send me." Isaiah now has this weird beast. Did you hear that description of the seraphim? These six-winged beasts. Man, that is crazy. That is crazy what those things are like. And this thing is flying at him with a live coal coming at him, touching him on his mouth. That's no coincidence. I mean, there's a reason. I'm a man of unclean lips. I'm a man of an unclean heart. How do we cure that? By judgment, by fire. Right there. And Isaiah learns something amazing happens. His sins are now gone. They have been atoned for. Atoned means that they are no longer accounted against him. It's been paid. But what Brother Ryan was talking about a moment ago at communion. And then a message from the Lord Himself comes. What is it? Someone needs to go and say this to the people. You know, the people who have unclean lips. Who will do it? And Isaiah says, "I will do it. I will do it." Have you heard this passage before preached? "Here I am, send me," and Isaiah goes. You know, and this is usually where we end the sermon. And I know some of you may be thinking, "Whoa, he's about done." Oh no, we're just getting started, because that's not how the story ends. No, a lot of times in our view of this passage, we hear, "Here am I, send me." Isaiah is ready to go. He's been cleansed. He has been made so that he can go and now minister among the people. Oh, he's got a message to say to the people. But it's a message that might shock us. Look at it. The next verses, beginning with verse 9. He said, He is God. He said, "Go tell this people, be ever hearing, but never understanding. Be seeing, but never perceiving. Make the heart of this people calloused. Make their ears dull and close their eyes. Otherwise they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn and be healed." Essentially what God is saying to Isaiah is, you go and you pronounce my judgment. You go and you tell the people the way it really is. And then Isaiah, talking to God, boy, talk about intimidating. He says, look at what he says in verse 11. Then I said, "For how long, Lord? How long? How long?" And he answered, until the cities lie ruined and without inhabitant, until the houses are left deserted and the fields ruined and ravaged, until the Lord has sent everyone far away and the land is utterly forsaken. And though a tenth remains in the land, it will again be laid waste. But as the terebinth and oak leave stumps when they are cut down, so the holy seed will be the stump in the land. This is often where we get confused. You see, we don't see God's judgment and what we come to understand later about as God's mercy in, being compatible. We try to figure that out. We say, well, God was really mad in the Old Testament, but he got over it, And that sounds a little flippant and a little silly, but that's not far from the truth from how a lot of us feel about it. It's because we don't understand the holiness of God. Our definition of the holiness of God is not what it should be. What would this intense light of majestic holiness look like with respect to the judgment of God? How penetrating it is, how devastating it is, how revealing it is. And as Isaiah is hearing this message, we are talking about a scenario of utter destruction. We're talking about exile of the people. We're talking about barrenness. We're talking about nothing at all being productive. It's almost like he is saying, I'm going to send another flood, except this time it's not going to be water. It's going to be utter destruction, and my people are going to be in captivity because of their hardness of hearts. There's nothing left. There's no sign of hope. Everything is ruined. And then when there seems to be just a little bit, just a tenth that's left that might be okay, that might be that might be salvageable, God says, no, it's going to go too. It's going to be consumed. And some of us struggle with passages like this because we think that doesn't fit into my paradigm of God. That doesn't fit my picture of God. Well, brothers and sisters, let me humbly say, we need to change our picture. This is God that we're talking about. This is God. We often refuse to believe God's holiness as judgment. We think, that's so much different than what Jesus was about. That was so much more different than what he talked about. But listen, if you don't understand, if you can't appreciate and believe in a God who is talking about this, then you don't understand Jesus. Because many of the themes that he was talking about, particularly to the Pharisees and the people, the Israelites in his day, it was the same song, second verse. The axe is about to come to the tree. Maybe the answer isn't to reject the truth of God's holiness as judgment, but to finish the picture. Now, that brings us to the third manifestation of God's holiness. Write this down. God's holiness as gospel. God's holiness as gospel. We get down all the way to the last half of that last verse of this chapter to see an amazing truth. Look at what it says again. But as the terebinth and oak leave stumps when they are cut down, so the holy seed will be the stump in the land. There is an intense dimension of God's holiness known as majesty. There is an intense dimension of God's holiness called judgment. There is equally as intense dimension to God's holiness called gospel, or perhaps another way of us understanding it is the word, write this down too, mercy. Oh, now we understand that one a little better, don't we? Yes. Gospel or mercy. Now, where do you see that, preacher, in verse 13b, the last phrase? So the holy seed will be the stump in the land. This verse introduces this equally intense, equally bright aspect of God's holiness, how that out of utter ruin, a stump, a root will grow. A root will spring up, we are told. When it looked utterly hopeless and burnt, a shoot will grow up out of the ashes. And that shoot, we will learn later, is Jesus, who comes up out of the ashes. What is the source of our hope, and how does he become that root? It is through the resurrection of Jesus. And we believe that in Christ alone, just as he came and conquered death, so we too, we live now and we will live then. Look at how Isaiah describes this just a few chapters later in Isaiah chapter 11. He comes back to this in chapter 11 where he starts by saying, "A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse, and his roots a branch will bear fruit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the Spirit of counsel and of might, the Spirit of the knowledge and the fear of the Lord, and he will delight in the fear of the Lord." This is a prophecy about Jesus and what he has come to do. Jesus, the arm of God, has come to demonstrate to us the gospel, the mercy of God, and how intense and how powerful that is. It's a message that this stump will produce, and as it produces, it will go forward. We learn later that those who went out in the name of the Lord, where did they go? They went to all the nations, didn't they? It's for all races. It's for all nations. It's for all genders. It's for those of whatever social standing. And what is it that will follow those who follow Jesus? It is holiness. 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 The gospel. We find, listen, if there's one thing that can be said about God, he doesn't do anything halfway. These dimensions of God are intense. They are just mind-blowing how intense they are. Listen, and so the judgment of God, yes, that seems intense, doesn't it? The majesty of God seems intense, doesn't it? Oh, so is the mercy of God, equally intense. But if we're going to have a picture of God that's accurate, you need to have all three. Because if you're going to speak the language of faith, if you're going to live the language of faith, then you must know whom you have believed. Brothers and sisters, make sure that the God you believe in is the God of the Bible, and not one that's been made up by popular culture or by anything else, by our own imaginations. God has not left us without information here. We just need to embrace it. Next week, we're going to continue this thought. Basically, what we're trying to do this morning is to paint an accurate picture of God. Next week, we're going to see another picture of God. We're going to go into another throne room. We're going to get to go into God's throne room again. And we're going to get to see another dimension of this and look at how God is a rewarder of those who earnestly seek Him. If we are going to live faith, if faith is going to be that which we speak and live in our culture and live faithfully for Him, then we must have an accurate picture to start with as the basis, as the foundation. And so this morning, the question that I want to leave you with as we wrap this message up is this: is the God of the Bible still the God on whom you believe exists? Can you, with Paul, Say, I know whom I have believed and am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I've committed unto him against that day. That, brothers and sisters, is faith. Right now we're going to sing a song of decision. Peyton's going to come. And as we do, I want you just to think this morning mainly about what you think of God, what you believe. Stand with me, would you please? Let's stand together. And as we sing this song, I want you just to think about what we've talked about this morning and what's your picture of God? Is it close? Is it accurate? And if it's not, what do we need to do to move towards that? Let's sing this morning this song of decision.